Hey everyone in the Reclaiming You Lounge. It has been quite some time, and today's been one of those days that I've just been doing studies and lectures and all that sort of stuff. So every now and then I just have a day where it's just devoted to that. So I had mentioned before that I'm doing human design and gene keys. I'm doing a 9-month mastery course in that. So I'm up to week 5. So that's very interesting. Absolutely loving it. Really insightful for myself and for those that I work with. That's not actually what I wanted to talk about. What I actually wanted to talk about, however, is a couple of the health trainings that I was listening to in the last couple of days. So what I actually want to talk about, as we know, because this is really important at the moment, especially when a lot of people are still suffering from COVID or long COVID, or even just some of the viruses that are going around. I know, as they said, that this year they are predicting that, of course, because last year a lot of people were in lockdown and kind of isolating, that the flus this year were going to be worse. Avril, hi, how are you? So I haven't long started, just talking a little bit about obviously this time of the year and, our immune systems and things like that. So one of the key things, and it's interesting, I was just saying I was listening to some health lectures in the last couple of days, but we know what they're finding is, and this is specifically to do with COVID, but this is also really important for all sorts of viruses, especially the herpes virus, which is very prevalent. They reckon over 90% of people have had Epstein-Barr virus and it's still sitting there dormant. But what's happening is, as part of our innate as well as the adaptive immune response, we know that our own immune system is also producing a lot of reactive oxygen. So what I mean by that is, when we talk about oxidative stress, and even, just from exercise and being in sunlight, we're creating some of these free radicals and things like that. So what they're finding is, as I said, our immune system is producing a lot of these, reactive oxygen species as part of its antimicrobial response. So, when it detects some of these pathogens like viruses and things like that, that's what happens. It starts, actually producing it as a byproduct. But also what happens with this coronavirus, this SARS-CoV-2 virus, is it actually also downregulates our body's ability to produce antioxidants. And that's what I want to talk about with this training. It's all to do with antioxidants. But this is where it gets a bit tricky because, obviously, do you remember some time back, I think scientists came up with that ORIC scale, and it was in the 90s, and it was all like, they were measuring, Linda, hey, how are you? Good to see you. And they were measuring, the antioxidant levels of, like blueberries, and I remember cloves were very high and all of that. But then they retracted it years later because they realized that it's not that easy because, it's not just isolating certain compounds. Like a lot of these things, as we know in nature, there's other cofactors and things that are with it that really amplify or potentiate the effect. Anyway, so what happens with this coronavirus is it actually also, as I said, downregulates our own ability to make some of these antioxidants. So that's where it's really important for us to have a really good antioxidant status. And, we don't often talk about this. People will often say, are you having enough protein? Are you having the good carbs? Are you having, a little bit of good fat? But we don't often talk about, how important it is to be getting antioxidants, living my best life, loving blueberries. Hope you're dry and warm. Blueberries are great. And even though they're quite exy at the moment, aren't they? But yes, we're dry and warm down. Well, yes, it's cool, obviously, but we're warm at the moment in terms of our heating. And definitely it's dry. So hopefully you guys aren't getting too washed out. I know Richard's parents are on the south coast, and I know obviously my mum's still in the hills, so I know it's been quite wet. So with this, cheaper than a cake, that is true. And much better for you, that is for sure. So what they're finding is, how what they've said with corona is, obviously there's lots of different factors, but, various things like even, someone's vitamin D status, like, if people have lower vitamin D levels, they, are potentially at a greater risk of having a more serious COVID infection, so things like that. But they're also finding it's the same with glutathione. So that's kind of like a master antioxidant in the body. And obviously there's certain foods and there's precursors that help us to make it. Because if you're healthy, we should be able to produce our, like, endogenously or internally, we should be able to produce enough of it. But, a lot of people are living with chronic inflammatory conditions. So, this could be obesity. I mean, what is it? 68% or something of the population are obese, or overweight. And that's what they find. With that, there already is inflammation. But also, with diabetes and other conditions like that, when they talk about that, obviously higher inflammation. So the antioxidant stores are already depleted. And what can happen is then the coronavirus and other viruses really can cause a lot more problems. So this glutathione, it's interesting because you can actually get it in supplementation form. It's not that common. I mean, you can buy it overseas. It's more readily available. Over here, it's only really practitioner brands as far as I have seen. I know bioceuticals, places like that. But what they find with it is it has to be in a specific form. So you can get capsules, you can get tablets, and you can start with a smaller dose and work it up. But ideally, they find liposomal form is kind of one of the ones that is going to be best absorbed. So do you guys know what I mean when I say that? Like what it is? And we know that, first of all, glutathione, it's kind of like a combination of some of the amino acids like, glutamine, glycine, cysteine. But this liposomal form, what it is, don't let me interrupt, but random thought, it's wet and gloomy and people are feeling depressed. Any tips? Yes, I'll come to that in a moment. I'll look at it there and that will remind me, that will prompt me. But yeah, with this, so basically this liposomal form, it's like this sphere of phospholipids. So it can be absorbed by other channels such as like fat metabolism and things like that. So it means that it can be, more easily absorbed because it's bypassing some of the other channels that might typically degrade it. But also because of the fact that it's got, like our cells also have this phospholipid bilayer as well. So the attachment to our own cells, from this liposomal technology means that we get that glutathione in a much more bioavailable form. And also you've probably heard of a precursor N-acetylcysteine. So I know a lot of people were talking about that. And I took that myself when I had COVID because I had some on hand. And that's kind of a great anti-inflammatory in its own right. It's a great antioxidant. It's been used for a long time for kind of lung conditions and things like that. So that's kind of why I was taking it. And I was very blessed that I had a very mild form. But so the reason why I'm talking about it is because Richard has COVID at the moment. So that's why I really wanted to talk a little bit about this antioxidant kind of, key thing that we need to be doing at the moment. So Tessa, hey, how are you? So we're just talking about antioxidants, how important it is for our immune system, especially for coronavirus and things like that, in terms of our ability to not only mount a better response, but, get over it more quickly. And they've even done studies, like they did a study on N-acetylcysteine, which, as I said, that's like a precursor and it's sort of a cheaper form of having the glutathione. But they did a study for like 6 months as a preventative treatment, and they found that compared to placebo, those that had it had a huge reduction in like the severity of any kind of colds or any symptoms of any viruses that they picked up. So it'll reduce the viral replication, and antioxidants like selenium do that as well, cleans up the oxidative stress that causes the tissue damage, reduces inflammation, etc. So, obviously the symptoms reduce more quickly and less severe, which is great. So where it gets a bit tricky, and the other factor to this as well, is when I was just talking about the herpes virus. So, really, really common. Some of the herpes viruses, people think of like herpes zoster virus, which people will talk about, the cold sores and things like that. And, that's sort of a really common form. They reckon that most of us, when we're born, we've got at least 1 or 2 sort of infections as a newborn. And, most of them, they say, are kind of this beta form. Some are symbiotic, some are commensal, so some are okay. Some work with our own innate kind of, microbiome that's there. But with a lot of these viruses, where it's interesting as well, because things like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the medical medium. So Anthony Williams has said that, he's got heaps of books. He's very, very popular, particularly in the US. And he's been talking to spirits since he was 4, he says. And he's massive on Epstein-Barr virus. He reckons that, the medical profession, the scientific world, they've only just scratched the surface of just how, widespread it is in terms of its the way that it's causing a lot of diseases and major conditions out there. So he really talks a lot about Epstein-Barr virus and the need for us to really treat that, because he said everyone's pretty much got it, and they have proven that over 90% of people have been exposed to it, and it's sitting there at a latent level. And this is, when people might say that they've had it might have been picked up as Epstein-Barr, or people have had other kind of like they'll say glandular fever, some of those kind of infections when they were younger. But anyway, so with these herpes viruses, what they've found is, because there is antivirals that they can prescribe, and, sometimes people would go and take a lysine supplement, and lysine is good. You probably need, you have a cold sore now. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, potentially. But also what I would say is, definitely, as we know, stress. And there's often cycles to it as well. People sometimes find like it could be, as I said, stress. It could be when they've been exposed to certain things, or they've eaten too much arginine containing foods, or, things like that. But what they're finding, and the reason why I'm talking about this in this context, when we're talking about antioxidants, is they've tested a lot of different substances, a lot of compounds, and they've found that, it has antiviral actions for some of these herpes viruses, like cold sores and things like that. So quercetin, or quercetin, like depending on how you pronounce it, which you find in like onions and apples and things like that. So they've found, and you can get it in supplement form. Now, it blocks the viral binding and suppresses some of the markers from being activated. Garlic we also know that, garlic's a good all-rounder. It's good for heart health and stuff like that. But it's been able to disrupt the viral envelope, if that makes sense, in the cell membrane. So it kind of inhibits the viral DNA synthesis, which is pretty huge. Another antioxidant is EGCG, and this is found in things like, even green tea and I think even raspberries and things like that. But they found that that also has a lot of action in terms of its ability to inhibit some of these, herpes viruses. So that's another great reason for us to, as I said, be including some of these antioxidants. Resveratrol, you guys have heard about that. Pomegranates, more and more, they're showing their ability to really interfere with the cell-to-cell viral spread and to inhibit the Epstein-Barr virus from being reactivated. Because the thing with a lot of these herpes viruses is the more times they're activated, the more cycles they go through, the more problematic it can become, essentially. So that's kind of why we want to make sure we're targeting it. Turmeric, is great in terms of it's been shown to help with inhibiting the immediate early gene expression. It inhibits the replication of viruses. It's anti-inflammatory. So, and just when you were talking, Linda, about sort of people feeling a bit flat and things like that, definitely, absolutely, I would include antioxidants for all of that as well, because sometimes there can be inflammation there as well. I mean, obviously, there's lots of factors that go into it. There can be lower vitamin D because people are indoors. There can be, obviously, sometimes when we're sitting there in our thoughts and we're ruminating and we're, worrying, and we start to go down those sort of cycles, omega-3, as I said, vitamin D. But, really the best thing that we can do is always just include enough antioxidants, which you probably are already doing, but this is just to highlight some of them, as I said, like the, the green tea and the turmeric, even good old onion and garlic. In saying that, the thing is where it gets a bit tricky is if you've got an issue, if you've got irritable bowel syndrome, which is very, very common, they say, there's certain criterion, but, generally speaking, if you've got a lot of gut issues that are quite chronic, they've been there longer than 3 months, and I think that the Rome 4 criteria is something like, at least one day every week for over 3 months that you've had an issue, and that's where it can kind of be, a change in bowel motion. So sometimes there's a constipation predominant type, or a diarrhea predominant type, or a feeling like you're not completely emptying, all those kind of things that can fit under the irritable bowel syndrome umbrella. Often where there is a lot of gut issues, one of the first things they do is say, get off high FODMAP foods. What is a high FODMAP food? Onion and garlic. So that's kind of where it gets a bit tricky. Some of these great antioxidant rich foods can actually cause, they can be a problem for people. So that's sort of where I would sort of say you always have to just tune into your body and see what feels right for you. So, it's, for instance, I know someone I'd recommend, because turmeric's fantastic. Turmeric's a great anti-inflammatory, teams up beautifully with omega-3 for where there's joint issues and things like that. Had great results, but occasionally you'll get someone that suffers from diarrhea or something when they have it. So that's a thing. Once again, great anti-inflammatory, great antioxidant, but for some people it's not. As I said, if my mum has garlic, within 10 minutes, she'll have gastro both ends. It's one of those things. And I've even heard of people saying to get anaphylactic to garlic. So, it's kind of that's where it's tricky. So as I said, it's trying to find the antioxidants that work for you. But also remembering that when it comes to antioxidants, it's always sort of things. So I've got about 5 gazillion things open, as I always do here. But, there's a lot of foods, like zinc's a great antioxidant. And we know that, zinc is often found in foods, like beef and chicken and oysters and, things like that. So that's where sometimes we are getting some of these things without even kind of thinking that we are, if that makes sense. And even as I said earlier, like with this quercetin, apples, onions are rich in that. And that's been found to, as I said, be a great antioxidant. The catechins, which is in like green tea and cocoa and berries and things like that. So you're probably getting that. Linda, with your berries, we know resveratrol, when people talk about grapes and berries and things like that. The anthocyanins is also, blueberries are rich in that, and strawberries. However, for my friends that are high histamine people like myself, strawberries are probably a no-go because, higher in histamine. Selenium's a great mineral, great antioxidant. You'll find that in Brazil nuts. You'll find that in fish and beef and poultry and brown rice, things like that. But one of the best things you can do, and this is what I've been doing for Richard, as I said, because I'm really conscious of having a lot of antioxidants while people have COVID or recovering from COVID, or as I said, you're just wanting to help with better health. Ben, hey, how are you? We're just talking about the importance of antioxidants here. So you can cycle back later, but I was just talking about with some of the research, how they're finding that, including a lot of antioxidants is really going to help with stopping the replication of some of the viruses like the herpes virus, which is really, very common. More than 90% of people have Epstein-Barr virus. And, of course, other viruses like the herpes zoster virus causing cold sores. So what you can do, and this is what I've been doing with Richard while he hasn't been well, is some other great antioxidants. So I said, if you can tolerate it, onion and garlic, I've been including those, of course, for their antioxidant, but also garlic for the antimicrobial. But also turmeric, I've been adding that to everything. And don't forget the good old cruciferous veggies. They're also rich in helping the body to produce more glutathione, which is our master antioxidant. So once again, like the garlics and onions and things like that. But also, broccolis and Brussels sprouts and, cauliflowers. And it's funny because I'll hear Richard kind of like calling the dogs over and he's trying to give the dogs the broccoli and the cauliflower and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, you need it. So that's where, a lot of these foods that we are eating, they are rich in antioxidants, which is great. So that's why I try and always have a variety of foods as much as you can, so you're getting that broad spectrum. But definitely, as I said, if you can tolerate them, the onions, the garlics, the turmeric, the cruciferous veggies, all really key. And as I said, definitely the berries and things like that as well. Herbs, spices, and as I said, the other things that can help with glutathione production, because as I said, that is the master antioxidant for us. Interestingly, even whey protein has been found to, because it has large quantities of cysteine, which is amino acid that's a precursor to, glutathione. So that is interesting. Also, exercise has been found to also help with, supporting mental and physical well-being, but it can also help with glutathione concentrations as well, relative to people that are more sedentary and things like that. So another great reason to exercise. And of course, as I said, more sulfur-rich foods, which we spoke about, like the onions, the garlics, the broccolis, the kales, the cabbages, meats, eggs, fish, all that sort of stuff. So hopefully that all kind of makes sense, but the key takeouts are, just making sure your antioxidant status is always good, just to help with, fighting some of these free radicals, helping with the inflammation. And as I said, glutathione really is one of the keys for us to focus on, so we can help our body to produce it more. But also, as I said, you can take it in supplemental form, or there's precursors like N-acetylcysteine and things like that. But definitely, you can get quite sufficient levels of antioxidants in your diet. So just kind of work out what works for you, and always have a variety. So Linda, hopefully I've kind of answered that in ways, but, definitely if people can sort of exercise inside, whether they can just, I don't know whether they're using a skip rope, or, whether they have any equipment at home, that's always good. Having sufficient vitamin D, as I said, omega-3, just being conscious of, their thoughts, whether they have got someone that they can talk to, things like that, because it's sort of, as we know, it's never just one thing. It's always kind of a multitude of things, if that makes sense. So anyway, I better go, because I do have to go and make dinner. I've already fed the dogs, but now I've got to go and feed me and Richard. I have cut up all the veggies, so we do have lots of veggies there ready to go, and I've already cut up the onion and the garlic and the turmeric and all that sort of stuff. So lots of antioxidants for us, lots of antimicrobial support, and anyway, fantastic, Linda. Cool. Good to see you, and hopefully you're all well, and hopefully you're keeping dry, and of course, hopefully you've got access to, great purifiers and things like that. Obviously that helps. And, don't forget some of the great antifungals as well, because obviously from an anti-mold perspective, like the white vinegar and the clove mix, you can Google some good sort of recipes online to make up some anti-mold mixes, as I said, that include that, so you can spray on any mold that you might see. Really important. I know my place when I was in Sydney, I did have a water issue, and having an anti-mold mix that I used to make up and then, as I said, spray on if ever I saw it, is really important, because obviously, that's the next thing. So obviously the air quality is important for our health. Constant mold issues, exactly, yeah. So look, we've had water issues here too. It's been dry at the moment, touch wood, but natural surface water, and then we've had issues with water. We've had to sort of do all these like various things around the backyard to try and stop some of the water issues. I know, it is crazy. I think Lismore and all that, they're okay this time round, aren't they? But poor Sydney, I know, has copped a lot, and it's to the south coast and everywhere. So anyway, much love. And I said I better go make dinner, and I will see you all soon. Much love. Bye.